Today this morning we're going to be looking at skilling for JET and partnering for inclusive growth in local ecosystems. And I think throughout the week we've been on a kind of journey. We started talking about JET implementation plan. On Tuesday we looked at specifically skills, and today is really around how we are grounding this in local ecosystems and the work that actually needs to happen in practice, on the ground, implementation, to make this come to life and to make this happen. I am Gugu McLaren Ushokunze. I head up Economic Inclusion at the National Business Initiative, the NBI, and it's my pleasure to be running this session today. So in today's session, we will firstly be hearing about the demonstration of this work that is taking place, led by the NBI, but in partnership with a number of critical partners and stakeholders, and seeing how this can really come to life on the ground. We will then be engaging on a panel, and I see we have welcome. In fact, a fantastic panel to give input from various aspects and various interests into supporting this work. So I will quickly introduce to you who will be speaking and who is on the panel today. First, we will be hearing from my colleague, Dr. Anthony Giva, who will be giving us a presentation to really take us through an example and a case study of this work. On the panel, we will be engaging with Stefan Wintels, who is the CEO of KfW. Welcome. And in fact, you arrived last night. This is your first panel, so we are very happy to welcome you to COP and to be engaging with you on this topic. We will also be joined by Joanne Yawich, who is the head of the JET PMU within the presidency. We are also joined by Faisal Mkhize. He is the Chief Executive of Relationship Banking at ABSA. So welcome, Faisal. Thank you for joining us. Virtually, we will be hearing from Karen Bosman from Westgrow, who will be giving perspective from a Western Cape perspective, and our own Shamila Subramni, CEO of NBI. So I think a fantastic panel and looking forward to getting into it. We also note that Stefan Wintels will have to leave slightly early for another engagement, so at that point we will happily excuse you. So to give you some insight into the work that is happening on the ground, we'll share a brief video, and then I'll ask Anthony to join us for a presentation. Thank you all so much.
South Africa has one of the highest youth unemployment rates in the world.
When you look at the figures from 18 to 34, it's quite possible that there are people in this country that would go to their graves without having worked one day. But also, often when we talk about the number of people entering the labor market, we think about or focus on individuals, when in fact, you have to imagine behind that individual, there's a household.
South Africa's got a high unemployment rate, but amongst the youth, it's more than 55%. And that in itself speaks of the fact that the youth have less access to educational opportunities, or where there's access to educational opportunities, it's not efficient to equip the youth with skills to take up jobs.
The NBI is an independent, voluntary, member-based organization. We work with our members to enhance their capacity for change, to build trust in the role of business in society. We really believe in collective action to effect change and to drive a better South Africa. The Installation, Repair and Maintenance Initiative, the IRM initiative, is an initiative which is managed by the NBI, but it is developed through collaboration with various partners. The initiative seeks to unlock the demand for jobs while at the same time develop the labor to take up those jobs. In other words, we work on both the demand and the supply side of job creation.
So the Atlanta Special Economic Zone played the role of facilitator and implementer of this initiative. The initiative has two components. The one is on skills and the second one is on SME development. On the skills component, the ACZ played a role of supporting the placement of students with companies, public or private companies, that's aligned to the training they received at the TVET colleges. That's allowed them to get practical exposure and experience within the occupational artisanal trade.
One of the strategic objectives of the college is being responsive for students or for young youth to be able to get a world of work. So from our side, as a college, we actually ensure that we recruit first the youth that is in need.
The IRM program impacted my life very positively and in many ways because I'm the only breadwinner in the house. After the technical training at the college, we were placed in workplaces. This is a male-dominant industry, but we as women can also do this work now.
The partnership between the ACZ and the MBI is quite critical for the success of the initiative. The Atlanta Special Economic Zone brings with its skills and expertise in SME development, skills development, along with a network of partners in academia, the private sector, the community, to help advance implementation of this initiative. The ACZ spearheaded the support of the placement of the students as well as the mentoring of the small businesses in the area.
I became part of the IRM program by one of the community leaders in Atlantis. My company, I think, lacked on more of the admin side. Operational, I was doing well, but I needed more assistance in doing the finance and on the admin side. Currently, I'm employing about, say, 6 people into my business. In the future, we're looking at employing now 2 permanent staff members as well.
I'm the founder of CWJ Holdings. The skills that I learned from programming was mainly how to manage your business and your workers, how to act professional towards your workers, towards your seniors, and towards your clients. Where I started from nothing, knowing nothing, and where I'm now, it was, for me, it's a great step. It's a great milestone in my life.
This has been quite a useful and challenging and insightful journey, the IRM partnership with ABSA. We learned that focusing and strengthening our focus on entrepreneurship is absolutely critical and urgent, because that's where we'll be able to get as many young people as possible into economic activity.
Thank you everyone. Good to be here today. So I'm going to talk quickly about why Atlantis and what Atlantis represents in terms of the model that we're developing and how we're implementing it across various similar industrial localities across the country. Atlantis represents a microcosm of the challenges we face in achieving a just transition. And when we look at practical solutions for the just transition in a South African context, we need to understand how local economies are evolving, particularly in response to climate change, the demand-side opportunities that this creates, and the implications for inclusive socio-economic transformation. As with many local industrial settings, Atlantis has faced a number of challenges over the last couple of decades. And this has had devastating effects for the local community in terms of employment, in terms of the variety of social challenges that have emerged. So what we see is manifesting out of that is that young people are disenchanted, they're struggling to find opportunities, they get caught up in a number of social issues that really stunt their ability to transition into the labor market effectively. So as we now emerge into a new phase of development within the local economy, we need to be able to be mindful of how are we going to ensure that whatever industrial development is happening there is happening in the most inclusive manner. Atlantis has been declared a special economic zone since 2018 with a particular focus on green technology. And in the midst of the challenges that we face in the local environment, we see that the structural inequalities become more apparent and more pronounced, and mostly as a result of apartheid. And as a result, we see these socioeconomic challenges becoming more prevalent. So we need deliberate strategies to ensure that we can optimize the opportunities that emerge as we reindustrialize, as we transition, right? So that we can, and the associated socioeconomic challenges that we see manifesting can be addressed along the way, so that we can de-risk further exclusion of communities from local economic development. So, as I indicated, this is a microcosm, and as part of our initiative, we've tried to understand the conditions locally from a demand and supply perspective, that as a basis for engaging with stakeholders and trying to develop collective strategies that can really build conditions for inclusive economic activity. So we embarked on a process of mapping these ecosystems. We've done through surveys, through interviews, through focus groups, through a range of data collection processes. And now the process around engaging with the stakeholders, to see how are we going to unlock the full potential of that local economy, how are we going to make sure that those value chains, that those local supply chains can be unlocked, and that we can link local businesses as much as possible to those opportunities. Our ecosystem mapping found that there are the demand for these services and products, and that there is potential for SMEs to grow. But there's a perception that these SMEs, particularly those based in the townships, are unable to provide the right quality, that they lack the suitable skills. There's fierce competitions from your well-established local businesses that have the expertise, that have the resources and the skills. And as a result, these SMEs are unable to signal their availability, their ability to deliver these services and products. And this locks them out of these value chains and these supply chains on a continuous basis. So the barriers that they face as a result of this disempower or disenable their ability to create the demand for jobs, for skills and jobs. So when we try to imagine what this universe can look like from a just transition point of view, from an inclusive economic development point of view, we try to make sense of who are the industries, where's the capacity to deliver jobs, where's the capacity to create employment. And when we unpacked all of these industries that you see along the bottom there, what we realized from a data perspective is that the majority of these businesses are informal, and based in townships, underqualified, and face a number of barriers to growth and formalization. And there's a disjuncture between the demand for these services and products at the top end there and the businesses that exist and that operate in those townships. So the goal of the program is to really identify within that spread of businesses or spread of industries, township-based industries, entrepreneurial artisans that have the capacity and the aspiration to grow, and that are willing to train and employ young people, to get them on a growth path, to link them to market opportunities, to unlock those value chains and those supply chains, so that we can create that bridge and break through the barriers that currently inhibit growth or equitable growth, right? And in doing so, bring the formal economy, where your large supply chains and value chains sit, closer to your township economy, and really create those market linkages that will unlock the opportunities for employment creation. At the same time, while we're doing that, these businesses need to be able to pivot. They need to be able to access niche opportunities that emerge in green value chains, in the circular economy, so that we're not positioning all of these SMEs largely to do the same things and competing in a very saturated market. What we want to be able to do is to see that we can create, we can innovate, we can help these businesses to find innovations and products and services that address certain needs, that certain opportunities within those local communities where they operate and within the broader local economy, and to get them on the path so that they can realize those opportunities. So the role of market intermediation becomes quite critical to address some of the failures that exist, which create this disjuncture between where these businesses sit and where the opportunities lie, which is at the top end there. So how do we do that? So on the one side, we've got to unlock the demand. We've got to build trust in these markets. We've got to create structured procurement marketplaces. We've got to stimulate market activation. We've got to leverage the various incentives that are required, particularly for these small businesses. On the supply side, we need to link SMEs to markets. We need to address some of the barriers and the issues that SMEs face in terms of skills, in terms of quality, and the ability to deliver on time and to the right cost. And we need to give them the skills base. So we need to skill the labor, and we need to link the labor to these businesses. But then there's the critical role of intermediation that sits between this in terms of, and there's a variety of intermediaries that operate in those local economies. So how do we identify those intermediaries? How do we strengthen those intermediaries? How do we make sure that they can optimize their role in facilitating this engagement between the supply and demand? And then we sit with a number of mechanisms that we need to make these local ecosystems work, including your kind of regulatory platforms, your regulatory bodies, creating these strong connections between stakeholders and making sure that there's strong accountability, monitoring and evaluation. And all of this must be governed by an adaptive ecosystem management framework. So in our engagements in Atlantis, with the Atlantis Special Economic Zone, with the college and the various other industries, provincial government and the like, the whole idea is to create that kind of adaptive ecosystem, to create these various mechanisms within that local industry that where we can have the interplay, we can have that collective action, we can have a strategy that's going to drive inclusive growth. And that's where that's how we're going to address holistically the barriers that these local economies are facing. So at the end of the day, you want to create a stable and inclusive network of interconnected firms and institutions within these geographical spaces, leveraging the low carbon transition through the green and digital economy to create conducive environment for small enterprise growth, increase opportunities for learning and earning, and accelerating transitions for young people into the labor market. Thanks.
So long. Thank you so much, Anthony, for painting that picture and giving really the detail around it. Inviting the panel to join us and to engage on a conversation around this. You would have seen from the video and from the slides that this program, while we've shared with you the Atlantis case study, is something that is national across a number of provinces, and we are fortunate to have a lot of support in driving it. We have support from GIZ on behalf of BMZ, Danish Industries, our member companies such as ABSA and PepsiCo, and most recently, KfW. And we're very pleased with the support that KfW provides in terms of our ability to scale and grow this area of work. And so, Stefan, I would like to start with you because I was fortunate enough to be at KFW's 75th anniversary celebration in Johannesburg and got an understanding of the depth of the relationship between Germany and South Africa and the role that KFW plays in supporting that. And so perhaps to hear from you more about that relationship and the support that KFW provides within the South African context. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thanks for the invitation. It's a very important project, and indeed we are very thankful for the partnership with South Africa. KFW Banking Group, as we call it, is operating in South Africa, in Cape Town and Johannesburg, across all the international businesses which we have. And very briefly, it's export and project driven in the private sector. So we support German and European companies to export into South Africa. We are operating via DEG, where we provide risk capital to SME businesses in South Africa. Also important because we strongly believe that sustainable and inclusive growth is best achieved through supporting the SME sector and creating an entrepreneurial environment. And thirdly, of course, we operate on behalf of the German government to support the country in its transition agenda and its growth via policy-based loans. Only in November we signed 500 million, also as a result of the JETP partnership. And we heard about a wonderful example, which is a small piece of this partnership. The green transition, from my perspective, is an opportunity also for South Africa to create sustainable growth and provide a better social future, in particular for young people in your country. And education is a massive lever in that regard. And we are proud to be a partner of your wonderful country.
Thank you so much for that. And to build on that, you've talked about the nature of the relationship and the support. And at the event, there was a lot of commitment for further support going forward. And I'm curious to understand from KFW, when you look at the investment and the projects that you support, you know, your measure of how successful they are and what you're looking to achieve through this support.
It very much depends whether we operate through the as a public bank or as a private bank. The return, risk, and social profiles are very different. So therefore, I would say in the policy-based loan, the KPIs, if you want, is clearly to achieve CO2 reduction. But equally important, and I think we can only stress this, is social and economic progress. Otherwise, I don't believe that the green transition will happen, because you need the social environment and the social society, in particular young people, believing that this is the right way for your country. And therefore, I would measure it by the rate of unemployment, by the improvement of education, access to water, access to electricity, a better future. And the future should be green, but it's a better future for the next generation.
Thank you for that. And one more, just because I want to make sure we engage with you before we have to release you. We talked about KFW's support for, in particular, the installation, repair and maintenance initiative. The support from KFW is allowing us to scale and to build the infrastructure for IRM hubs across the country, and really to take this model and be able to ensure that we are providing these opportunities across the board. And so to hear your thoughts on the interest in this particular initiative and the kind of vision for its growth through the support with KFW, but also with our other partners.
Yeah, I think the film wonderfully summarized the core mission of this initiative, and we need skilled workers. Skilled workers will find a lot of jobs and a lot of job opportunities, and again, education is the main lever. And the technical expertise which this program delivers is also pays into the green transition, because you need a lot of expertise, engineers, to support that. So therefore, I'm glad that we think this holistically and that we can on behalf of the German government, provide grants in order to provide, again, a better future, job certainty, and a purpose to these people. And we saw wonderful examples of people, not only young people, but people who have a better future ahead of themselves.
Thank you very much for that. And maybe I'll turn to you, Faisal, from an ABSA perspective. As a supporter of the initiative, how does this fit into ABSA's strategy? If you could share a bit more around your strategy around this, in particular around just transition and the bank's thinking in this space.
Thanks, Coco, and grateful for the opportunity that has been provided to us by NBI. It's a very important, I guess, partnership for us. So maybe back to your question. We are very inspired by the nature of the impact given the work that you do in communities, especially if one looks at some of the storyline coming across from that video around the work that happens at Atlantis. You know, it just tells you that, you know, these things are making a difference, they're very impactful, and they are changing lives. And I guess it's very integral part of the purpose at ABSA. You know, we are very, you know, serious about making an impact. We are very serious about making a difference in communities. And if one looks at maybe just a reflection point around the killers of our ESG strategy, one of them, it's inclusive, you know, finance. We want to make sure that as part of the capabilities we have in the bank, that we are able to reach out, you know, across the length and breadth of South Africa, and also in markets where we are doing business, that we can be able to help and support, you know, our clients across the spectrum. That's very important for us. And then the second pillar, obviously, it's climate. That's why our participation in terms of green energy finance is very important. And in fact, one of the interesting things in this space is that all the budgets that we reflect on an annual basis as we go to the board, as part of our commitments, we are able to exceed them. What it says that the opportunities for green finance are there, and we are very excited that we can contribute and continue to make a very big difference to our clients with regards to financing opportunities in this space. And then one last one is just governance. Obviously, as we do this work, we need to make sure that we follow all the required protocols in the process where we invest and spend money because we use quite a bit of our client funds as we reach out into the public space, that we do everything according to, you know, the governance parameters that we need to follow, because we are a bank and a lot of people, the shareholders, entrust us with their funds, and we need to make sure that as part of doing this work, we can be able to be proud, you know, about the efforts that we are running. So I think that's our story. It's a very serious work, but I must just say that one thing that stands out for me this morning is that sometimes it takes you out of South Africa to learn some of the impact around some of these strategic projects. My commitment is that, and I think given the nature of the impact we're seeing, based on those, you know, case studies, we should be able to do more. We have an opportunity to expand because we have NBI with a good tested model, and then we can obviously give ourselves an opportunity to replicate some of the learnings out of the program. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that, and I think you make a very important point around being able to replicate this. I wanted to shift to Karen Bosman from Wesco, who's joining us virtually. Hi, Karen. I hope you traveled back safely and happy to be home. So just to hear from the perspective of the Western Cape in terms of your strategy in this space, but also how the work that is taking place in Atlantis fits into that broader strategy.
Thank you. Firstly, thank you very much for inviting Wesco to participate here. It is wonderful. It's been an incredible series of discussions. I've been lucky enough to actually be sitting in that room until 2 days ago. So very nice to be here and to be participating. Maybe a quick word about Wesgrove. For those who don't know, we are the official tourism, trade and investment promotion agency for Cape Town and the Western Cape. And we work very closely with a range of stakeholders in the province. So we work with the Western Cape government, with the city, with Green Cape, with the Atlantis Special Economic Zone, with Freeport Saldanha, and then with Investor Say, the Western Cape branch. And then very much also with private sector and non-governmental, with the diplomatic corps. So we're very sort of nested in the economy of the Western Cape and the business enabling environment. And then I think a very important point to sort of make before we delve into the strategy is that the Western Cape is, and for quite a while has sort of been leading towards being a very strong green economy hub on the continent. It is very much part of a vision that, you know, stems back to 2010 and before. And it is within this context of sort of economic ambition within the green economy, taking the green economy very seriously, and then also taking inclusive economic growth very seriously. That sort of is the encompassing context within which this is really a great initiative and fits in really well. So, sip of water. The Western Cape government launched its new economic strategy this year, which is called the Growth for Jobs Strategy, or the G4J strategy, as we call it. And it sets very ambitious targets. It sets a target of building R1 trillion jobs-rich, inclusive, sustainable, diverse, and resilient provincial economy that aims to be growing at between 4% and 6% per year in real terms by 2035. So this is a very ambitious plan, but it is very much centered on the fact that the Western Cape government believes that the private sector has a big role to play, and that the Western Cape government's role is to enable both economic growth, economic activity, but then also partnerships like this, and for business, civil society, and government to be working together. The key points that the vision of the strategy sets out are inclusive, increased inclusion, a competitive business environment, big focus on increased sustainability, so mitigation on the one hand, but very much also then resilience, and focusing on resilience in terms of climate shocks and other exogenous shocks. There are a couple of clear principles that guide the thinking and the decisions which are set out in the front of the strategy. And then crucially, there are 7 priority focus areas which were sort of agreed upon through a process of analysis. And these are the priority focus areas for the short term and medium term, but these can change as things evolve. So for now, the initial horizon is sort of almost very short term with a look towards 2026. And then there are a number of key enablers and accelerators that have been identified. Very importantly, very big focus on partnerships and on cooperation, both as an enabler and as a guiding principle. Big focus on equality of opportunity, and then, of course, sustainability. And these are sort of your guiding principles. And then the 7 priority focus areas, although sort of the net zero and economic opportunities are the most important ones, I think it's important that, these are taken as a whole, because without these are all critical pieces in the puzzle. So the first one is to drive investment, and through driving investment to essentially grow the economic opportunities. And then there's stimulating market growth through exports and through domestic markets. So those first 2 PFAs, Westgrove plays very strongly in those. And then number 3 is energy resilience and transition to net zero, both of those. So looking at load shedding and resilience, and looking at the same time transitioning. Water security, technology and innovation, infrastructure, and then improved access to economic opportunities and employability. And the key sort of lens through which the economic opportunities are looked at is it looks at the pathways to economic opportunities. So it looks at your employability assets, so your knowledge, your skills, your experience, your competencies, career management skills, workplace readiness, and then the creation of those economic opportunities. And a very big focus also on the, sorry, I think I picked up something on the airplane. economic opportunities are accessible. So there's a lot of spatial inequality. So again, something like this Atlantis program, where you're creating economic opportunities very close to the community, is core to the strategy. And then maybe just a very quick overview of so Wesgro would almost come in at the bigger picture side of it. So while you are having to create all of these opportunities and skills and everything you need for the transformation, from our point of view, what's also incredibly important is to look at what investors are looking for, and that's changed faster than the world can really keep up with. Investors need access to affordable clean energy, otherwise they're not even going to look at your destination. So transitioning your economy to net zero in South Africa is unfortunately we don't have the cleanest grid. So we really need to focus on the ability to provide clean energy as fast as we can. And then within that is obviously the ability for corporates to reach all their other sustainability targets, which the Atlantis Special Economic Zone is really focused on doing. And through initiatives like this, also strengthen investors' ability to sort of leverage the environment in order to achieve their targets. And then obviously for us to be able to leverage the investors' objectives in order to achieve our targets of skills development and socioeconomic impact. And then the other thing, obviously, that's incredibly important to any investor looking to invest is the accessibility of skills. So yeah, everything fits perfectly. I think I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
Karen, thank you for that input. What I think is important is looking at the alignment that we are creating. So if we talk about the local ecosystem and how that speaks to at a provincial level and also at a national level, what we are really looking to do is find that alignment and that coordination. And I know this is part of the challenge that you have, Joanne, is about understanding how all these pieces fit together. And that, yes, there's going to be lots of projects, activities, etc. happening, but at some point they have to feed into something that guides what is happening. And then sitting within the JET PMU, within the presidency, part of that is how you are able to do that. So just to hear your thoughts and reflections on, I suppose, the importance of that work happening at an ecosystem level, but also how that is able to kind of move up into something that is overarching, that is coordinated, so that there isn't lots happening, but it's more aligned.
Thanks, Gugu, and morning everybody. And yeah, I just want to pay tribute to the NBI team and its partners, because I've seen at very close quarters this program grow from something very small to something that has real potential to operate at scale. And I think that is a really huge achievement. Okay, so if we talk about the work or the approach that is embedded in the JET investment plan and in its implementation plan. And I mean, talking about institutional arrangements is sometimes boring, but I think it's important. Because what I suppose underpins our approach is the realization that if we're going to make this thing happen, if the rubber is really going to hit the road, then what we have to do is not only all be going in one direction, but we all need to find ways to work together and to take whatever little bits is done here or there and pull it together into something that is much bigger. So we want something that is bigger than the sum of its parts. And so what we are suggesting as a kind of institutional model for the JET implementation is that we identify for each one of these areas, and skills is an area on its own, but it's obviously very, very integrally linked into the employment issues, the SME development issues. What we are suggesting is that you have a lead organization that has both coordinating capacity and secretariat capacity, And then under that, you bring together the very wide group of stakeholders working in whatever the particular sector is. So everybody in this room, for example, plus a whole lot of others. And just looking around the audience in this room, you've got business, you've got labor, you've got civil society, you've got funding partners, you have a very wide set of the stakeholders who are necessary. And then what you identify as the particular work streams that you're going to need to have going forward, and you start to develop or pull together the projects and programs that are already in place in order to be able to make them operate at scale. So that's essentially, I think, that where we would want to go. So I think, firstly, an emphasis for everybody. Every single one of the different participant groupings in this space has got to find a home for themselves in this environment, and has got to find a voice for themselves in the environment, and has to be supported to do that if necessary. So I think, so the young people, for example, in the video that we saw earlier, who found employment, and the small enterprises, and I was particularly struck by the woman who spoke at the end, who said she came from nowhere, and she has been able to build her business to the point that she is now looking at how she manages a whole group of people. And so you want the space for all of those voices, all of that experience, all of those people, and then you want to go in one direction. Around the skills space, I mean, I think that one of the things that we still have to think about very carefully is what is the work that we actually need to do in the technical and vocational education and training space. And again, it's something that I know the NBI has worked on for many, many years with the Department of Higher Education and Training and the CETAs and the TVETs and everyone in that ecosystem. But I think that the question of how, in particular in this context, the expertise in business, the models that the business sector has been able to build can really support and empower the people who are delivering that TVET education at scale, I think is something that we haven't cracked. And in our skills section of the implementation plan, we talk about what we call interventions in the ecosystem, and I think that that is one of the very critical ones that we are going to need to move on. So yeah, I mean, that's a sort of fairly broad response, Gugu, but I think you know, this is a journey in its early stages of creation. But I'm confident that if everybody feels that they've had a part in that early stage creation, that what it is going to do is not only allow for the linkages and the scale to be built, but for the sense of ownership that we want from the ground right up to actually be established. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Joanne. I'm conscious that, Stefan, you'll be leaving us shortly. And I wanted to allow the opportunity, Shamila, if you will allow, just for some thoughts and reflections on the different perspectives that you've heard from a provincial government perspective, from, you know, sitting at a national level coordinating, and any thoughts you have or comments before we excuse you for your next panel.
I'm not in a position to give any advice to anybody, but I enjoyed listening to different perspectives from all the stakeholders. And I think that's the task, if we share a vision and an objective, that we come together, listen to each other, and have a plan and execute. And the objective is, again, a green and social and economic progress for the next generation. Otherwise, I don't think that we will save this planet. And therefore, we need to think this together. This is a huge task, but I think for your country, a wonderful opportunity to have a green industrialization and jobs on the ground, and that gives me courage to support this also from our country, and we are pleased to be a partner of your country in that regard, and I'm sure we will continue and reflect upon the progress and to be very honest what it does take to achieve this objective, right? There's not a lot of time we have. The pressure is huge, but this example shows what is possible if we work together.
Thank you so much, and thank you for joining us. I'm not sure exactly how much time you have. It's tight, but thank you so much. We've really appreciated your input and your participation, and all the best with the rest of your COP. Please join me in thanking Stefan for his input. And maybe, Shamila, thank you for allowing that, just your perspectives. So really you've heard the work that's happening within the NBI that you obviously drive from a strategic perspective, but also maybe some reflections on NBI within this space and really navigating, doing the work and working at an ecosystem level and ensuring that there is this link to broader perspectives. Perhaps you can share some insight around that role that NBI plays.
Thank you, Gugu. Good morning, everybody. I'm very glad to have you here bright and early with all the crowd, so thanks for being here with us. So, Gugu, thanks for that, and thanks to all the other panelists. I think it's always great to hear in one room the different perspectives coming together. The NBI's role has largely been a bridge between the private sector and government. And that's the role it plays in different spaces, but I think particularly here we can see how that's come through and helping in that coordination role. So we understand the challenges of fragmented approaches and interventions, and hence then the need for coordination and alignment. We aim to demonstrate that through multi-stakeholder partnerships, we can achieve that significant impact. And you know, that's such a cliched voice, because it seems like we're constantly hearing we've got to work together, we need multi-stakeholder partnerships. But to see it demonstrated in practice, I think, is where it really is the difference. And I think they're very grateful also for the receptiveness of all the different parties to do this, between the Western Cape government, the SEZ, our corporate partners as well. And it really starts with the receptiveness to be able to do that. And that's now started to see the impact that you've seen so ably demonstrated in the video. So another way, I mean, that the NBI has done that in the real value that can come from that approach of, you know, taking the pain in being the coordinator and having the multi-stakeholder view was through our Climate Pathways work and the Just Transition program that we did in collaboration with BUSA and the BCG, where we created multi-stakeholders. We effectively engaged with multi-stakeholders, 30 plus CEO champions to oversee that work, 450 different stakeholders overall in the consultation. And the insights were instrumental in South Africa, shaping the approach to the just energy transition. So we continue our support then of the just energy transition and the pathways work through this now, the JET skilling program, and to support the implementation plan, the JET implementation plan, working with and coordinating private sector to support the 5 interventions outlined in the implementation plan. We've worked in skills development, as we've heard, and that Anthony mentioned earlier, for many years, and currently demonstrating in practice, as you've seen now, the demand-led ecosystem model through our installation repair, the IRM initiative. And that, of course, is not just in the SEZ, right? That's the work that we're doing through various hubs. It's been outlined already. And so that's already creating, I think, for us, a replicable model. So thank you also, Joanne, for acknowledgement on that. And I have to say on the role you played in helping birth that early on in the NBI. Thank you. To see something grow to that extent, I think must be incredibly rewarding. So it puts us in a good position to leverage the Climate Pathways work a little bit. And so that's the role we've played. I'll leave it at that for now, Gugu, if you have deeper questions, of course.
Of course. Thank you so much, Shamila. And just to say, for those that are joining us online, I do see we have quite a number of people online. Should you have any questions, please pop them in the box, and we will certainly get to them in a little bit. But maybe, Faisal, to turn back to you from an ABSA perspective. ABSA was actually one of the first supporters of IRM. When Joanne said it was a little project and we were, trying to build a model and test it, and ABSA came on board and supported us, and as really we've grown together in a partnership, and even have quite an exciting vision of where we're going. And you saw in the video this alignment. And I'm interested in particular around your focus around youth unemployment, around entrepreneurship in SMEs, and really building that ecosystem. From a bank perspective, this would be at multiple levels, so not just funding, but maybe talk through your thinking in that space, knowing that as a, where you sit, you can achieve significant impact. So to hear more about that.
For that great question. So our view is that sometimes you have to go into your market and look for clients. That's just one option. Another option that we have is to create your client. So I just think that over and above just the citizenship work that we do around empowerment, giving opportunities for skills for the youth programs, what we're doing in essence, if you really want to understand it, we are able to build future small businesses, that over time can look back and say and reflect to say that ABSA was there in my journey in terms of initial skills for me to become a successful business. And what it means in process that we must be able to walk the journey with this individual. It's not good enough that we are able to give the skills through this program, and then as people progress, they soldier on, they build capabilities to run their own businesses, that we are not there in terms of support. So I think it's an integrated approach that is going to be required here, and that's why I think the work that NPI is doing in terms of identifying some of these opportunities, because they are rare skills that we don't find in many organizations. We must be in a position with the team that we are able to leverage such capabilities, such partnerships, and ensure that we are able to even to make a bigger difference in this space. What is very clear, if one just reflects, is that the importance of partnership to make some of these things work is very important. In this instance, you've got provincial government, you've got national government, you've got partners such as yourself that are leading the space, and it's very easy for us to mobilize funding because we've got tested programs, there's a track record, and there are body of evidence with regards to what impact is there. My sense is that we can do more, and I just think that this is just one of many possible opportunities that perhaps we can amplify going forward. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you. Just a follow-up from that, there was a session the day before yesterday that was talking about one of the challenges around SMEs is the ability to access supply chains and within procurement of large organizations, and part of our model and our thinking is about how you make that. It's absolutely critical for SMEs to be able to access these supply chains in order to grow, to be sustainable. From an ABSA perspective, what does that look like? What are the challenges, and how can we think through those? Because I think when we look at this ecosystem, that's one of the critical levers that we can pull to create more sustainable small businesses.
Absolutely a good point. In essence, we as a business also require a lot of goods and services in the marketplace, and we require suppliers. Sometimes we work with big suppliers, but as part of the program, when we award contracts to some of these large entities that do business with us, part of the conditions of the contract is that we expect them, at least in their value chain, to be supporting and empowering and helping small business to grow, because it is in our DNA that in the future we need to look back and say how many small businesses we've built that over and above just banking with us, over and above just skills they have, that are now doing business with the bank. So an ideal goal for us is to saying we can walk the journey with these SMEs. Over time, they must be able to saying over and above just banking with ABSA, I do business with the bank. And then that's where the circle then becomes much more powerful. And I think directionally, that's where we need to go. Maybe on the point around the focus around SME and skills development, we've got a unit in the bank under the leadership of Stephen Zwane that drives citizenship. And one of the key pillars of the citizenship agenda in the bank is entrepreneurship. And it's driven to a large extent by just the philosophy and the principle of knowing that if we really want to make a difference and create a dent in terms of levels of unemployment in South Africa, it means we must go an extra mile in terms of programs that are absorbing some of the youth in our country, give them opportunities, give them skills, that over time they can be able to stand on their own and run their businesses. And in the process, those becomes the bank's clients. So it's a win-win type of scenario. So in the work that you do as NBI, we are very keen to understand, and maybe perhaps if you've seen some of the good programs that you believe that we could participate together and grow over and above what the work that we do now. My sense is that we have the resources to be able to do that. We need to just ensure that we identify those opportunities, and together we can even make a bigger impact beyond this program that we spoke about this morning. So that's my interest. My sense is that, while resources are limited, but I don't think as a bank, given the size of our institutions, we will struggle to partner with you in terms of amplifying the work that is being done currently. Thanks.
Thank you for that. And maybe just to shift to Karen, because I think from your perspective, from the Western Cape government, but particularly from Westgrow, the focus on economic growth, the importance of it at that level, I'm curious to hear how small business, SMEs, feed into that, and your thinking around the critical importance of their ability to grow from a larger economic growth perspective, and to share some of the thinking that's happening at that level.
Thanks, Gugu. Yeah, I think we all reasonably aligned in the province on that fact that small businesses are the absolute heart of the economy. And that is where the jobs come from. And so that's why I really do like this approach that you guys are taking in terms of saying, how do we equip the SME to create the jobs? Whereas I think there's been a lot of focus on let's create the skills, but without actually thinking through sort of the focus on the capability of the SME to take it forward and to get the contract. So I think from our point of view, again, taking out taking the big picture approach. The demand and the supply side is obviously very important, and I've really enjoyed what I've heard over the last few days in terms of the jet skilling approach to really sort of looking at what the economy needs, especially with the transition now, the amount of new jobs that we're going to be needing, and the reskilling and the upskilling and the new skills, and without the economy being able to create those, obviously, from the big picture point of view, again, we're not going to be able to create the investment attractiveness that will attract investors who will, ultimately play a big role in creating the demand for the jobs again. So that, in the big picture, but then the crucial piece is that sort of the SMEs that fit into those value chains. And I think what is going to be important, which we're starting to pick up on now, is for the SMEs also to understand the sustainability landscape and language and targets, and it's another whole level of sort of complexity in a way. But at the same time, if we can really focus on enabling the SMEs who are feeding into those value chains and supply chains to your larger corporates to align to what they're looking for and what their needs are in terms of their reporting, I think that could be a very sort of key strategic advantage piece of work that can be done, adding up, obviously on all the other work that needs to be done in the skills and capabilities. But yeah, big focus on SMEs. I think we have the Department of Economic Development that we work with really has as its core focus sort of SME development. But then where Westgrow comes in is, on the one hand, we do work a lot with them on the export promotion side. So, getting them export ready and helping them reach global markets. But on the other hand, it's really creating that sort of supplier database and supplier linkages and ensuring that when you land a big investment, how do you get as many of your local SMEs to really fit in and supply that investor, so that you can capture as much of the gains of that investment for your local economy. The more the supply they can supply from a local point of view, and in this case, a hyper local point of view, the more you can really keep those benefits within your community. And yeah.
Thank you, Karen, for that input. I think some critical points. It's all pointing to kind of how all these things need to fit together and these interlinkages. And there's lots happening and lots of ideas, and Faisal has committed ABSA's funding to support all of this. Is that, yes? Good. But Joanne, maybe to turn a bit to that, you know, there's lots of things happening, and the ability to understand where this funding may sit and how we're able to kind of align it. I know you probably get asked about funding a great deal, but it's absolutely key in being able to support the work that is happening. And maybe you can share some insights around that and what that's looking like to support work like this.
Okay, Gugu. Yeah, look, I think that when we look at the funding for both skills and SME development, what we've got to look at is to look at the entire pot. And so, I mean, as you know, South Africa doesn't sit with a money problem in terms of the state spend on education. Worldwide, we are high in terms of what we allocate to our education system, but our outcomes are poor. And so I think that a large part of this is about how does that very large amount of money that is sitting in the state system that goes into the TVET colleges, that goes into teacher training, that goes into the universities. Firstly, how is that used in a way that generates better outcomes? And I think that that is quite a big part of the funding thing. And I think the question of what it is that you need to do in order to support that to work better is really part of the kind of grant funding, concessional funding, funding from the business community, looking at how the corporates spend. And I mean, corporates in South Africa spend a huge amount on both enterprise development and investing in education. And I think there's a real question about how that spend is used in a more purposeful way. So there's then the question of what does the international community put in, and I think that in this context specifically, there's the question of grant funding. As part of the work of doing the implementation plan, we did try to build a register of all of the grant finance that sits in the JET package, and it's on the presidency on the State of the Nation website. And it's something that we want to update on a quarterly basis, and it's also something that we're hoping that other funders, including the philanthropies, would be willing to put their information into. And I think it's quite essential because you then start to understand where this money is going and what is it funding. In the context of what we are talking about, there's quite big allocations for skills. I think that for skills programs. My sense is that they're very bitty. It's a tiny bit here, a tiny bit here, a tiny bit there. And so I think the fragmentation of that money is a problem. But I also think that it's about how it works together with what is in government, what government is providing, what the corporate sector is providing. That is really, and is the incentive structure appropriately set up in South Africa to be able to make that money work as hard as it possibly can. So I think it's also about quality of finance. It's not just about quantity. And I think that to the extent that we can build really good scale level programs that have demonstrable impact, our strong sense is that there's a world of funders out there who would be very interested to fund the energy transition in South Africa. But I think it's really on the back of saying, you know, here are the tangible achievements that have been made, and here's the ecosystem of partnerships that is going to involve your fairly small bit of money making a really big difference. So I think that those are the the conversations around it that need to happen. Thanks.
Thank you, Joanne. Always important and insightful. Before I shift to Shamila, there are some questions online that I will get to afterwards, but if there are any questions in the room, please think through them and we will get to them as we start closing out. But Shamila, I think that Joanne talks about, there is funding, there is money available. We know that from a CSI spend from corporates, a significant, if not the majority of funding goes to education. So it speaks to something in the system that we need to work through, and it's certainly the approach that the program is trying to take, and maybe your reflections on MBI's work in this space, and really working to build and capacitate the ecosystem so that we are able to have a bigger impact and work better when it comes to achieving our objectives.
Thank you, Gugu. So Joanne set up nicely what that ecosystem potentially looks like, but it's the coming together. I think that's the challenge that we're facing now, and to do that in a meaningful way. Faisal, before I forget, this is only one hub. There's another 16, 20 that you can start looking at. So get that checkbook ready, or the virtual wallet. No checkbooks anymore, right? Okay. So in relation to the partnership with the Western Cape, I think that's a case in point. So maybe a little bit more information about how that's structured. One of the issues that we're seeing, and the kind of symptoms of the problem, of course, is the fact that we often find that there are people coming out of the pipeline on one end, but they're not employable. And so that is a reflection. So what we are putting in education, the other day, I think Temba Nkwenazi, the Anglo regional CEO, gave us some really sobering numbers on how many people go into the system in matric, for example, how many actually complete, how many of those then actually get into tertiary education, and how many of those complete tertiary education. And I think you end up with like 5% ultimately actually coming out on the other side, which means that somewhere in between, I don't think we're necessarily going to say we're going to get to 100% in there, but it also says there's a big potential for other parts of the education system, for example, the TVET colleges, to produce those kinds of skills that are employable, that are right for being able to support us in the transition that we're seeing. So, the Western Cape IRM partnership is providing that platform for harnessing that collective capacity, as we're saying, and different actors in that local ecosystem. So understanding what that is, what are the conditions in that ecosystem, there's very much a context-specific element to that. There isn't a one-size-fits-all approach, but I think the learnings from how the ecosystem could fit together certainly is replicable. And that's what we're seeing. And then, of course, you solve for local nuances and context in between there. So they create the conditions that's conducive for the SME growth, particularly as part of the green transition, which is what we're looking at now. That will spur the increased demand for skills and increased demands for potential employment. So let's look at this from then a demand side and a supply side. So if we start with the demand side, you've got to ensure that the policy and the regulatory instruments pave the way for increased investment into that infrastructure development and maintenance, and including the shift to renewable energy, increased application of energy efficiency technologies. So you can start saying, okay, this is where we want to do that, and how do we increase the demand, and what then is the regulation that needs to happen, and how do we then work even with the uptake from the employer side. Then you need to forge the strong partnerships between government, the private sector, that's including your industry associations, your sector bodies, and the other key stakeholders. You've got academia, you've got research institutions, all of which have a massive role to play. And you want to look at creating then to unlock that localized and inclusive demand for the creation of the SMMEs. We want to advance priority projects, help them to access finance as required, including inclusive financing for SMMEs in collaboration with business, the government, civil society, and financiers. So we're looking at the different areas there where we can do that, right from capacitating the SME down to actually being able to have that ecosystem develop for financiers to come in. Then on the supply side, so the partnership is looking at assessing the service delivery capacity of the relevant government institutions in respect to the energy transition, and developing and delivering appropriate institutional capacity interventions to be able to get that capability up and running. So we work as an ecosystem and we support each other. And of course the TVET colleges with a big role to play for effective support to accelerate that. So we've got TVET colleges, but what we're saying is that that is a great hub where you can, alongside that, help with capacitating the SMMEs in that same ecosystem to be able to say, in that local space, what can you do? So that's an expansion of your traditional TVET services to include SME support within that. And mapping the local ecosystem for those skills development in that region. We need to then help with a network of the SME skills and hubs, and that's where, again, the TVETs are playing an anchoring role and can be expanded, both to be able to help with the uptake of the skills, but also in the production of the relevant skills themselves. And then, of course, the implementation measures where you're equipping township-based SMEs and young people for these emerging opportunities that you're helping creating at that local ecosystem level. So those are the few things we're looking at: the SME acceleration in that hub, the SME incubation, and then, of course, the demand-led skilling side of it, and focusing in this case on renewable energy and energy efficiency.
Thank you so much, Shamila, for painting that picture and getting into the detail of how essentially all of these things are coming together. I'll shift to the room and online to see if there are any questions. If you've got a question, please pop your hand up. Yes, there's one in the front. Two in the front. Wonderful. Please introduce yourself, and if you've got a specific person you would like to engage with, please let us know. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Guru, and to the panel as well for the insightful reflections. My name is Ngateko Chauke. I am Programs Director at Oxfam South Africa. My question is to Shamila in terms of, your systems thinking, ecosystem approach is very much, insightful. But when we look at TVET institutions, for example, they are very much under-resourced. So, how are we grappling with some of those social issues where we also need to look at the system and how we improve that in order to almost ensure that it's in line with the needs of, young people, vocational skills, etc. The second aspect is in relation to the changing rules in technology globally. How are we also thinking of integrating innovation into some of these structures to enable us to, when we reskilling and imparting the skill into younger generations, as we ready ourselves for the transition, how we also bring in that tech and innovation for us to catch up with the rest of the world as well. Thank you.
Okay, can we take just one more, Shamila, and then you can respond.
Thank you. It's very informative. So this, I think, can be taken by any one of the panelists. I think I've been following the discussions around specifically skills and business ideas, especially for SMEs on just energy transition. But at some point, I was looking at the Southern African Development Bank, which is South African based, and the challenge was not just about getting investment injection for financing these sort of ideas, but it was to identify those special ideas that actually leverage, it was the SACU region focus, I think, that actually leverage that energy transition. What are the ideas that are worth investing in? So it's exciting to know that ABSA is doing this work, which is great with the NBI. But then I think my question is, when you're looking at the skilling, especially for energy transition, do you have numbers? What number of entrepreneurs are you supporting in terms of interest? How many apply? But after those that apply, how many are worthwhile investing because they will actually contribute to energy transition? I think I asked this because of the question of skilling, because it's not just about skilling, it's about skilling the right type of skills, the right type of people that will contribute to the transition. And I think one of the things perhaps I would like to also ask, which is second question and I'll quickly end there, is that for us as trade unions, we've struggled with assessments, labor impact assessments. So how are you choosing these entrepreneurs, right? Do you have a real projection of jobs that will be created to replace this? In terms of the type of skills that are going to be generated, it would be interesting to know what you are using as models to assess the scenarios. Thank you.
Thank you. Very, very good questions. Any other in the room? Yes, at the back. and then we'll respond.
Hi, I'm Shilot Masiti. I'm from Limpopo, and I think my question can be taken by either any of the panelists. So I want to ask about, the SMS's funding. How are you guys, when you choose projects to fund, how are you verifying and validating those projects, and what methodologies and frameworks are you guys using to do that?
All right. So, Shamila, if you could take the specific questions to you and Faisal, I think the two are related when it comes to assessment and funding, therefore, for you.
That one, and then Faisal can do the next
Sure.
one. Okay. So let me start with the question from the lady that brought all that brightness into the room. Thank you. So on the question, and I have both Anthony and Gugu, who are actually the experts on the ground on what's happening with the TVETs. The first one I want to say is that, as the NBI, we actually have MOUs with each of the TVETs directly. And that enables us to work with capacity building directly with them. And if you combine that with the demand-led skilling side, so you've got potentially some of the off-takers and the corporates on this side, where a lot of the need for the innovation and the thinking is already inbred, and kind of that can factor through in helping us to be able to work with the TVET on shaping the curriculum to make sure that what comes out is fitting for what needs to happen, and that can breed in some of what we're seeing as the trends in the innovation and the necessities around that, to work with the TVET directly. And so that's where that approach helps, right? Because you immediately have the input from the corporates, for example, to be able to look at that. So in some ways it assesses both. In relation then to your other question, which is on the capacitation of the TVET, again, it is through those partnerships and some of the funding that we get that we're able to start helping directly that issue. But let me pause there and see if Gugu and Anthony can have any additional reflection on that, on the current undercapacitation of the TVETs and how we're helping with that.
Thank you, Shamila. Anthony, if you could respond.
Well, yeah, I mean, without going into too much detail, I think the question has always been around you can't blame the TVET system for why there's no jobs. So there's always an issue of that skilling can create jobs, and we know that that doesn't work. So, and I think so, as Shamila has emphasized, we need to be able to unlock the demand, right? And we unlock the demand in various ways. One is that we look at the large corporates, obviously, and they bring us signal in terms of the kinds of skills that they need. But the bigger area of demand creation is in the SME environment. And to unlock that demand takes time. Right, so with your formal SMEs, that sometimes you can get there a lot quicker. With your large bank of informal SMEs that sit within your township communities that face all these barriers, it's going to take a lot more time in order to unlock that demand. So the question is, how do you start to make sense of where that demand is? Right, what can you do in the short term to get that demand? And in the short term, we work very much in the formal sector. We work with formal sector SMEs, and we understand where through engagement, we collect the data, we understand where their skills are, and then we can work with the TVET colleges to understand what they need to do to deliver on those skills very specifically, and we can capacitate them to do that. But in the long term, we've got to open more workplaces. If there aren't workplaces that can train and employ young people, all the skills you provide are going to be meaningless, all right, in the main. I think the other issue on the entrepreneurship side of it, and just to refer to that as well, is that we believe that there's only going to be ever a small proportion of young people that are truly entrepreneurial, right? We don't believe that entrepreneurship is the solution for all of our ills around unemployment. You're not going to create multitudes of entrepreneurs just out of the air. What you have to do is quite a lot of detailed assessment of who are the entrepreneurs, who have the aspiration for growth, who have the mindset for growth, so that you can really put your emphasis there. And that requires quite rigorous assessment, quite rigorous engagement on the ground with these young people, with these existing people who are working in these kind of informal economies, to really understand who are the entrepreneurs or not. Obviously, we can't go into the details of how you do that, but there are methodologies that can enable you to really unpack and understand who are the entrepreneurs that you need to work with to grow, and who have the aspiration, and then you can identify to what extent they're going to be able to then create the demand for jobs.
Maybe just quickly to say, Faisal, I'll hand over to you in terms of The social aspects, where young people are coming from, we're very cognizant of that, and part of the work that we do in our workplace readiness program is really something that's not just the skills they will require for that, but also the psychosocial support that's often required for young people as they're navigating this world of work and training, so that when they have this opportunity, they're really best placed to do that. And that has shifted and changed a lot. We have a program called Gender Equity and Social Inclusion, which really helps us work with young people, with the workplaces that they're going into, with the facilitators at colleges, really to create an enabling environment for these young people to be able to navigate and take up these opportunities. Thank you for the questions. And Faisal, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Coco, and thanks for the two great questions. I'm going to respond, and then maybe with the permission of Coco, and allow Justin maybe just give you some color with regards to absolute numbers with regards to how we're operating in this space and who do we select and how do we come, to make an impact in the agenda of just transition, particularly on energy finance for the youth, because it deals with it every day. But broadly speaking, let me give you some numbers. So as a bank in the last few years, we've got a commitment of 100 billion rands in terms of funding for energy finance. We well into our 80%, for the last 2 years with regards to that commitment. When it comes to SMEs, we realize that obviously, given the challenges of energy supply in South Africa, we had to make sure that we're able to stimulate, solar finance in some sort of way. And we also know that given the challenges that SMEs are facing, they don't have money available all the time to be able to transition into the solar space. So what did we do? And if you travel to South Africa, you will see across the length and breadth of South Africa, you've got our billboards that indicate to say that we are helping SMEs to go solar. How do we do that? Every funding that is required to do installation, if you bank with us, we give you a 50 million rand grant funding as part of the package. The reason why we do that is because we know that sometime in the early stages of this journey, setting up infrastructure for solar in a business is going to be expensive. Money is not easily available, so we use our own enterprise development funds to be a catalyst so that people can be attracted in terms of ensuring that they've got, secured energy supply. In the process, their businesses will keep going. And if their businesses keep going, it means that we've got a client for life, right? So these are some of the real-life practical experiences that we do in terms of ensuring that we ensure that we generate, enough, incomes across the base so that you can even to fund some of the SME space. So that work is currently underway. We'll continue to do it, but there's a very good momentum coming through there. But over and above that, if one looks at skills, how to identify people that perhaps could benefit out of the process. We work obviously with our partners in the energy space. Some of the companies, we ask them, we work with them, they train, they've got a target of training maybe 200 or 300 youth in terms of skills to install, solar capabilities. They go through an accreditation process and they have green cards. Then over time, what it means, these individuals are integrated back into those businesses that are offering training. But by so doing, it means that you are able to respond to some of the demand that is out there with regards to energy finance. So there's a lot of stuff going into this area. Over and above just training, we put our money in terms of grant funding. Over and above just grant funding, we also ensure that we can be able to link some of the people that have received training into the ecosystem so that they can be able to sustain themselves over time. So these are the principles that guide our participation in the space. Justin?
So unfortunately, sorry, Fez, you answered it beautifully, and thank you for that answer. But noting the time, we are out of time, and there's actually a very interesting panel following around youth and skills, so a very nice follow-on from that. But we are out of time, and I wish that I had known that there were so many questions in the room. I would have tried to open it up sooner, but thank you for that input. And for the online question, I think that it has been answered to a degree as well. So thank you for the engagement online. And to the panel, thank you for your incredible insights. I think it's been hugely valuable and insightful in painting this picture. It's complex, but what we talked about is that there is there is alignment and coordination that is possible within local ecosystems and feeding up to support broader objectives. So thank you for your time and your input. Karen, enjoy the Western Cape. I hope it's sunny and nice. And thank you to everyone in the room. Thank you. Thanks, Joanne.